Today, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Almost 3,000 people died and wounded by the attack. Due to Japan's assault, US seems too hard to maintain in neutrality. President Roosevelt began to collect men who can serve in the war. Before an attack on Pearl Harbor, there is a possibility that US is going into the World War II since US somehow involved and helped Great Britain. Therefore, in home front, as men are going into the war, this will bring a lot of changes. I guess that it will also impact on women's life.
After Pearl Harbor, America chose to support the war and the Allies. Therefore, Franklin D. Roosevelt gathered soldiers. After men left for fighting in the war, women began to take jobs to support the war. Therefore, the percentage of working women increased 12 million to 18 million. Many laborers were needed to work for military services and helps. Government started to recruit women with using slogans. The more women at work, the sooner we win. As women were supporting the war, more than 13,000 women volunteered for a unit called Women's Army. Auxiliary Corps, later called Women's Army Corps, was created. This group was supported by General George Marshall.
Not only Women's Army Corps were formed, women accepted for volunteer emergency service called WAVE was also made. Women in the WAVE had the same payment and the rating as male personnel, but they were still restricted for serving aboard combat ships or aircraft to duty in the continental United States.
One is that there was a chauvinistic attitude that women would just break down at the site of combat, and they didn't want to be responsible for that covering war is not women's work, if you will. Another is that soldiers, if they were aware of the presence of a woman reporter in a combat zone, would go out of their way to protect her, perhaps at the expense of their own lives. And then the last one is women couldn't go into combat because there were no facilities for women. There were no toilets.
After World War II, married women went back their usual life as housewives. However, married women were encouraged to keep on working just like during wartime. Also, single women had to keep working to maintain life by earning money. Women were still working on low-paying jobs, but rate of women who were working was hitting their peaks after World War II and continually rising.
You saw this contradiction in an understanding of women's aspirations for after the war, for their lives after the war. You saw that, again, corporate executives and government officials always were claiming that women were coming into the war industries for the duration of the war, and then that they were expected to be delighted to turn their jobs back over to returning servicemen, right? That's always the assumption of those officials and of the publicity that was so widespread that women workers were just coming in to the economy for the duration of the war. But you saw in the interviews with women workers themselves that they had been working for wages before the war, or looking for work before the war, or they had been widowed by the war. And so after the war, they had to keep working for wages. And they would have loved to keep those higher paying jobs. They would have loved to keep those jobs that gave them real benefits, even vacation pay. Some even had begun to win maternity benefits during the war. It was an incredible increase in standards of living for women as a result of those wartime jobs. They would have loved to keep those jobs, but they weren't allowed to. They had to go back to working as maids in hotels and dishwashers in airport cafeterias. So they're pushed out of those good jobs, but not out of the labor market. They're pushed down.
Overall, women's society was affected in positive and negative ways. They were able to have opportunities by having jobs and creating women's armies. They began to gain power in the military and army field. However, women also had hardship. They were paid less compared to men and faced racism, especially for African American women. But everything that women gained during World War II played an important role for future advancement. Thank you for listening to the United States News.